With the rise of grain costs over the last several years, there's been a lot of talk about alternative feeds that are either cheap or free for our pigs to consume. And farmers are always looking for cheaper feed sources. After all, the bulk of the cost in raising pigs is the grain cost that we feed them. From the sows that farrow, especially when they're in milk, they use a lot of grain. And when the feed ration for pigs costs $400 or $500 a ton, and when feeder pigs consume 900 to 1,200 pounds of grain, the vast majority of the direct cost, anyway, of raising pigs is in the grain costs. And as a result, many small farmers or pastured pork producers turn towards finding cheap grain costs, alternative feeds, and free ways of feeding their pigs. I'm Rob from Battle Family Farms, and we've been raising pigs on our farm now for over 5 years. And 3 years ago, we started a farrow to finish operation, which means we breed our pigs on the farm, they farrow on the farm, and we raise the feeder pigs on our farm. And after seeing how much feed pigs consume, we have looked at a variety of different ways of finding alternative feeds, cheap feeds, or most importantly, even free feeds to feed our pigs on our farm. And when people talk about free pig feed, they love it, but most people don't consider that free feed is not really free feed. In this video, let's talk about some of the various free pig feed sources that we can find on our farm and talk about the positives and the negative benefits of that. This food waste includes stuff from our homes, but also in restaurants, food banks, food suppliers, and grocery stores. Before we talk about this in more detail, let's talk about a couple different things first. Then we'll discuss the true cost of these free feeds. Finally, we'll talk about what free or cheap food sources we use on our farm. Pigs are omnivores, and a lot of their nutrition that they need comes most easily in animal products. This includes essential amino acids like lysine and many others. And it's much more difficult to get these in grains and especially in fruits and vegetables. And this affects a lot of the different free food products that you can get, and I've tried a lot of these with varying results. By federal regulation and most state laws, they must be cooked, and most require a permit. The problem with vegetable and grain products is many of these essential amino acids that the pigs need are not in there. First, many of the food waste products we have come in our homes, whether we grow our own garden or whether we use the vegetable scraps that we purchase from the grocery stores. And these can be things from pea hulls, trimmings from salads, and many other things. They must be pre-plate, though, if they encounter anything or if they're overlapped and touching anything that's touched meat, that is a violation of those federal laws. This is a decent option if you're just feeding a couple pigs for your own family, but it's little nutrition, and unless you have a huge garden, it's hard to do with more than 2 or 3 pigs. Now, you can get some of these from restaurants. Many of their pre-plate food trimmings, these include things that you would normally feed within your home, spinaches, broccoli, many of those other vegetables can be pretty nutritious. Food banks often have produce and they need to give it away quickly because there's a short shelf life. And so you may have some apples with bad spots, broccoli that's about to go bad, whatever the case may be. And so sometimes food banks can be a huge boon for these products. And again, the nutrition on these varies depending on what you're getting. Dairy is probably one of the best byproducts that you can get. Milk from a milk distributor that distributes it to grocery stores and gas stations and many other places. They pull the milk that's about to go bad or that has already gone bad, and it's a great source of nutrition. There are lots of essential amino acids like lysine and many others. Again, federal regulation requires that it be pasteurized, and some states will require a permit even if it is pasteurized. It's good for the dairy distributors because these dairy products, this is helpful for a lot of the dairy distributors because the milk products often require special handling and it's treated as a toxic substance in large volumes, much like animal manure. Another option is whey from cheesemakers. When we lived in New Jersey, there were a lot of small farms that produced their own cheeses.
In areas like these with lots of small farms that are milking and creating their own cheeses, they may need an avenue to discard a lot of their whey, especially if they do not have pigs. It's hard to get rid of a lot of it, especially at once. Another option that's easy to get is bread. It's often out of date and stale. Does not matter with pigs, and it's a good source of energy, but it's a lot of empty calories many times. Many people will often combine bread and dairy products, and it's okay, but again, there's not a lot of fiber there. You do get a pretty decent balance of calories and protein, but it's not particularly outstanding in my mind anyway. One of the problems with bread is it can really affect the quality of the fat, and I'm not a big fan of that particularly myself. One other option that you can get is pumpkins if you have a good source of pumpkins. I know I used to drive around town in the fall picking up leaves, and I'd grab the pumpkins that people were discarding after the holidays, but it takes a lot of driving. Pumpkins are heavy. They do offer some nutrition for pigs, and it's halfway decent nutrition. You got to feed a lot of them to get that nutrition. And this is where a lot of the true cost of these free feeds comes in. When we talk about nutrition for livestock, that's usually measured by dry matter. And then the crude protein is a percentage of that dry matter. So when you purchase grain, for example, it's going to be less than 10% water. So it'll be 95% dry matter. But if you get vegetable scraps, milk, pumpkins, it's going to be mostly water weight. For example, a gallon of milk, depending on the type, will weigh 11 pounds or so per gallon. But depending on the type of milk, there's only 1 pound of dry matter nutrition in the milk. So you're carrying around 9 to 10 pounds of just empty water with no value, feed value whatsoever. Pumpkins are over 85% water, so if you feed 100 pounds of pumpkins, it's like feeding 15 pounds of grain. So it's a lot of lifting. It takes a lot of work. It also takes a lot of space in the digestive tract, which is great if you're trying to fill the bellies of your sows. But for young feeder pigs, it's not particularly great. They don't have quite as large digestive tracts to consume those real bulky forages. And anytime you're going to get these feeds that are more expensive, you put 10 times as much wear and tear on vehicles when you're going to pick it up. For example, if I were to go get about 1,000 pounds of feed in the back of my truck from the feed store, I may have to get 8 to 10,000 pounds of milk or 8 to 10,000 pounds of pumpkins to equal that 1,000 pounds of grain. That's 8 to 10 times as much wear and tear on our vehicles. It is a lot more expensive. The thing that's often overlooked is the nutrition, and most small farmers, most pasture pig farmers, do not understand swine nutrition very well. In fact, many of us are not anywhere close to understanding. We think that protein is so important, so if we feed an 18% or a 20% protein, that the pigs are getting everything they need. But we forget that pigs need a specific set of essential amino acids to grow well. Most good swine feeds, grain rations, have the correct amino acid profiles and trace minerals that the pigs need to grow well and take advantage of those opportunities. If you have a pig feed that may have 16 to 20% protein in it, but it doesn't have the right nutrition, they can eat twice as much of that pig feed and still lose weight. Having the right amount of nutrition, not just protein, for the pigs is imperative. Because so many pasture-raised pig farmers or small pig farmers or beginning pig farmers do not understand swine nutrition very well, it's difficult to understand when you're buying a bagged feed that, hey, this bagged feed may not be good, but it's even more difficult to get all of the trace minerals, all the proteins, all the essential amino acids that pigs need to grow well if you're giving them a variety of different foods. Let me take a moment to tell you, to give you the 3 or 4 areas where we get most of our free food sources today. The first and foremost is we started putting pig paddocks in the wooded areas of our farm. If we want our pigs to be able to forage on hardwood mast like beech nuts, hickory nuts, acorns, and that kind of thing, they need to be in larger paddock sizes if we want to reduce the amount of grain that the pigs need. For example, in one of our 10-acre fields that we put our pigs in, there are lots of hardwoods, mostly oaks, but they have not been managed really well for the best hardwood masting crop. And as a result, we can get some decent feed value from September on into November and December out of there. But in that 10 acres, we can't feed 50 pigs. We may be able to feed 2 or 3 pigs in that 10 acres, with a significant portion of their diet being acorns. The most significant source of feed that we have delivered to our farms are leftover pumpkins from pumpkin patches. They're delivered to our farm for free, and some years we get anywhere from 8 or 10,000 pounds of pumpkins. One year we got closer to 40 or 50,000 pounds of pumpkins. And so even though that 40 or 50,000 pounds of pumpkins was only the equivalent of a couple tons of feed, it still made a pretty significant difference in reducing our feed cost and increasing the quality of the pork we were producing. By far, the cheapest thing that we are feeding our pigs is we are growing it on our farm with cover crops. We're intentional about growing nutritious, diverse cover crop mixes that our pigs can graze that drastically reduces the feed cost for our pigs. Our next video will demonstrate more on that. It's a much more detailed process, but I would encourage you to check that video out. There are some good, cheap, or free feed sources that you can give your pigs, but just know that your time, your energy, the wear and tear on your equipment is worth a lot, and free feed is not always cheap feed. Take care and have a great day.